so much for joining us for the 2020 Music EdTech Conference, Moving Forward Together. We hope that you've come away with some new ideas and strategies for the upcoming school year, whatever that may hold. In order to receive your professional development credit hours for the conference, you will need to complete a short assessment in the PD Certificate section of your conference portal. Before I hand it over to our final keynote speaker, NAFME President Dr. Mackie Spradley, I want to take a moment to thank our participants, clinicians, and those working behind the scenes to make this virtual conference possible. But most importantly, to all of the music educators, you continue to do such amazing work and you inspire us every day. So from all of us here at the Music EdTech Conference and Music First, thank you.
Hi, I'm Mackie Spradley. I'm the president of the National Association for Music Education. It's so exciting to be on this call with you, and I'm excited to be a part of this conference. Moving forward together is one of the things that we really have to spend some time thinking about and critically looking at how are we going to get there? What plans will we put in place? What are the things that we really need to consider as we move forward together? I believe that moving forward is a way to advance the field of music education. It's a way to enhance the field of music education. It's a way that we can step up. We can experience something that we've never seen or experienced before. It's a way for us to move into a new place that for years we couldn't even imagine ever being there. Even though it seems like one of the worst times in history, there is a small silver lining in that things are so pulled apart. It gives us the opportunity to do whatever we have thought about doing. I think one of the things that's so important as we go through this time, that we have the opportunity to increase our territory, so to speak. That we can advance in places that have only been dreams. And that we can look at what's in front of us instead of always looking behind us to give us indicators of what needs to happen or what can happen. We have to look at what lies ahead, because the things that happened in the past, the molds have been broken. The blueprints have been burned. The sketches are no longer in existence. It's a new place. It's a new day. It's a new world. And I think about this in a couple of ways. One of them being, I frequently have, a list of places that I want to go, new places, either places that I want to visit, like museums or restaurants or new venues. And I have to admit, sometimes I'm a little bit shy to go by myself, but I'm always more comfortable if I can go with someone else, if I can have a friend that rides with me. And along the way, as we're on our way to our destination, we're sharing great conversation and also sharing the feelings of anticipation. What is it going to be like? Well, I've heard that it is, and I believe I read that it is. And so we travel and we finally get to the place, to the parking lot. We're still not in the place yet. We've taken the trip. But we don't experience all the benefits of going there unless we get out of the car, walk up to the door, open the door, and walk in. And that is what I believe is very important in this dialogue. If we're going to move forward together, it's not just the movement that allows us to get to the new place. It's when we get there, we have to agree and be willing to open the door and to move around and to get to that place so that we can see what's inside and we can participate with the things that are going on inside. We can experience it. It can be a new thing for us. All of those things of walking hand in hand, sharing with a friend, opening the door and moving forward, those are key elements if we as a music field are going to move forward together. And when I think about it, there are great benefits of having a friend. There are great benefits with us sharing this experience together. I think about a couple of things that are important to us. Before we take another step in being on our journey to moving forward, there's some key things that we have to consider things that have to be a part of our dialogue, a part of our planning, part of our envisioning, a part of our reimagining, a part of what we're going to do. And if we don't include some of these things, we will end up being in the same situation, the same spaces, and the same places that we have been in the past. We'll just move up and stay the same. And I don't think that's what we want to do now. I think we're ready. The time is now to make a change. So in the big picture, consider the space that we live in as an individual. Think of that space such as where you work, the community in which you live, where you shop, where you frequently dine, your colleagues, your friends, your network, the people that give you a thumbs up as it relates to a new job or a new idea or opportunities to network and engage with someone in collaboration. Your space includes your voice. Your space includes how much access you have to things. Your space includes your privilege or your lack of privilege. Your space includes your wealth and your knowledge and your experience. So think about all of those things. As individual music educators, we experience that differently. We don't have the same space. And it's not that one space is better or more grand than the other, but they are different. Our spaces are different. The power of the words that we say from our space is different. Some feel empowered to say something. Some feel silenced and not able to say anything. Some feel they must bite their tongue. So if we're going to move together as music educators, we have to think about all of our music educators and all of the different spaces in which they live, all of the different domains. You know, as we go on this journey, there are so many unknowns and uncertainties, things that we're not sure of. There are different paths, multiple paths, and we can't be in shock and we can't be paralyzed and paralyzed with fear and overwhelmed with worry. I know that our expectations from last year didn't really pan out the way that we anticipated that they would. And even for this year, our expectations are shaky at the best. Nevertheless, there's still some of us that are willing to get behind the wheel and go down the road in warp speed to get to the new destination. And I believe all of us are experiencing change. And if you're like me, change is not always your best friend. You don't necessarily want to embrace change when it walks through the door. As I said, some have fear, worry, anxiety. Some experience physical and emotional pain and stress. And some get to the point that they are actually feeling that they are experiencing trauma. It's beyond any words that they have to express the load that they may be feeling on their backs or in their mind. Understand that every music educator is in a different space, and every music educator is feeling this different, not better or worse, but differently. And as educators who specialize in music, we know that the power of music can bring healing and hope and encouragement to our mind, body, and spirit. It can lift our hearts. It can help us become more at peace. And so as we are moving forward together, it's remembering the power of music and what it can do within our communities even now. Before we take another step, I think it's important that we think about music education, not just surviving. We don't want to have gone through all of this, all of the crying and the woeing and whatever we're going through at this point, just to say, I survived. I tell you, because in 1980, I live in Texas, so there was a heat wave. And I don't even recall how many days that we spent above 100 degrees. 100 degrees now is very, very common, but in the 80s, it was not so common. And I remember at the end of all of that summer, where you just felt like you were gonna die, you couldn't breathe. The thing that people talked about the most were the t-shirts that everyone bought that said, I survived the heat wave of 1980. I think we need to have more than a t-shirt. When we get through this, it should be more than just surviving. We should come out on the other end of this as stronger, as more resilient, as more dynamic, and able to respond. And in fact, be so strategic with what we do that we have left a firm foundation for the future of music education. We have to remember we're all in this together. It's not just you and me, it's all of us. What impacts you impacts me. If I hear good news, then I'm hoping, and you should be hoping, that if it's possible for me, it's also possible for you. We are in this together, and we will walk side by side. I think that every music educator is valuable, is a contributor to our efforts, that individually and collectively we make a strong, unified voice. But I also want to challenge you on one thing. And this is important if we are determined that we're going to move forward together. I want you to look around you in any space from now on and ask yourself, who's missing? Who's not here? What organizations? Educators from what part of the country? Educators from what kinds of schools? That is important, that we know who is missing from the table. And if we know who's missing at that table, that empowers us to go out and search and to engage and try to make sure that everyone in some way is represented at that table. Because when we are moving together, everyone's voice is important. So keep that in mind as we move forward together. Another thing I think is critical to our work as we move forward, and we can't ignore these factors. It's the huge elephant that's in the room. And even though we're going through a global pandemic, I think one of the things that the pandemic did was truly unravel and remove the covers and the wool that we've had over our eyes all the time. The systemic and institutionalized racism that is everywhere, that is embedded in everything, that it is in our schools, it's in our health system, it's in employment, it's in the differences between wealth, it's in everything. And those profound inequities are part of our individual space and our experience. Again, my space may be different from yours, but it is just as important as yours. And so when we think about what we have seen during the global pandemic, the lack of food, the lack of health care, the huge education gap, the employment gap, the wealth gap, which we've always known has been there, the gap in having access to technology and benefits for our families, and so much more. And not only this, not just all of these multi-layered concerns, but also that all of this is occurring within a very polarized and politically divisive community. I stand on one end, you stand on the other. And this is not about being a Democrat or a Republican or a liberal or a conservative. And I know you're probably asking, well, what in the world does any of this have to do with music education? I'm so glad you asked that question, because everything in education, every act in education is a political act. We don't educate our students in a bubble. And we don't have schooling and systems of education in a bubble. Our schools and our system of education mirrors what happens within our society. It's a microcosm of what we see in our culture and in our society. It's mirrored in our schools. I want you to understand that sometimes issues like this cause people to separate. And it's more important than ever as music educators that we allow ourselves to see what's really happening in our schools. Your school may not look like mine, but I guarantee the fight that I may have to go through, you need to fight that fight with me, because it's just as important to you as it is to me. Because music education for all of our students is critical, and no student should be left out and left without that experience of having a great background in music, should they choose that. And to have it as a part of their curriculum, not something that's set aside, not something that is extracurricular, or not something that is co-curricular or special, but we are part of the core. We are the foundation. Students learn by repeating sounds and patterns. Music. My fight is just as important to you as it is to me. To ensure that every student has equitable educational opportunities. It's important that we talk about this and talk about these issues as we're trying to move at warp speed down the road to get to a better place. If we leave part of the country behind, or the rural schools behind, how does that help the field of music education? If we leave the urban schools behind, how does that help the field of music education? If we leave elementary students behind, how does that help us? It doesn't. And so it's critical that at this point, we think about these things as a part of our moving forward together. I think there are two personal and professional tools that we can kind of put in place to ensure that we have framed ourselves correctly. One of them is reflecting on the past so that we are sure of where we've been. We know what that was like. And everyone was not served. Some people were left out. And we know where we are right now. It's a new place. It's not anything that we've ever seen or expected in our lifetime. But we're going to use both of those bodies of knowledge to craft our future, to put some walls and some parameters about what we think we would like to build. It doesn't mean that it would be exactly that, but it helps guide our thinking. So there are some questions we must ask of ourselves. Who are we? What do we believe? What is our identity? Do we, if someone asks you, who are you? Do you say, I am the music educator from blah, 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 blah? Do you say, I'm a choral director? I'm a band director? I'm an orchestra director? How do you answer that question? How do you envision yourself? How do you see yourself? That's critical, because how you see yourself is the way that you teach. It's also the way that you engage with others. It's also surrounds and builds up your expectations for others, as well as to how much effort you would put into something to make it come to pass. All of those things build a concept of who we are. And that identity, guess where it lives? It lives in our space. It helps define who we are. And there are other ways as music educators, other ways that we define ourselves. And it's by our success, what we think is achievement, what we think is demonstration that our students have learned or that they're good. All of those things help us or inform us about our own identity. And we have the power to change all of those things. We have the power to define ourselves and determine what does success mean to me? And what does achievement mean to me? And what does learning mean to me? I tell you, we can't hold on to our old way of knowing and our old way of schooling. The systemic structures and gatekeepers that have, stood at the door with their staff and their shield, ensuring that no one gets past that door, either by implementing a test, implementing a certain kind of repertoire, implementing all kinds of standards and experiences that don't necessarily tell us what the student can learn and be able to do after they get there. It's just a gatekeeper. So these are things, as we're moving forward, these are places where we can ask questions, that we can challenge the status quo, that we can say enough is enough. It's time to move back, move from those things and move to something different. We use labels a lot to talk about ourselves and about others. We talk about superior and poor. We talk about traditional, non-traditional. We talk about the standard, and then we talk about alternative. We talk about the established canon, and then we talk about emerging. We talk about the established canon again, and we compare it to innovative. We have all kinds of ways of labeling and placing some level of this is the best and this is the worst. But all of those lines that have been drawn in the sand, all of those barriers, all of those gatekeepers, it is time now, in order to move forward, to ask questions about those things. We have an opportunity to make a difference about hidden curriculums, hidden standards, the unspoken rules that nobody knows except a few. And those that don't know, they're just left out in the cold. I want you to try to think about a time when you were maybe in a staff meeting or in some kind of meeting with an administrator. And I think that at some point, most of us have experienced this. When you're in a staff meeting and there's a reference to, well, we're the core subjects. We're the academic courses. Y'all are the specials. Y'all are the extracurricular. We'll do y'all last. We'll think about you last. Or we won't think about you at all. You don't matter. And the decision makers, the people that have the power, make the decisions about who is included, who is core and who is not, who comes to be important in that setting, in that discussion, and who it doesn't matter what you say. As music educators, many of us have experienced that. And I know if you're like me, you've been, you know. If you didn't say anything in that room, that very moment. You certainly walked out of that room and said something. And you probably shared that with another colleague, and how you felt that you were not respected, and that the time that you spent in school learning your craft and making and practicing and making sure you knew about education, and the time that you've spent with your students developing relationships and working long hours for rehearsals, and for someone to say or to indicate or to even suggest that what you do is not as important, you have been fired up and ready. Yeah, you've been fired up and ready. And that, my friends, is the same way that some of your colleagues feel. That's the same feeling some of your colleagues have experienced. When some of us think light or less of others, it's not a good feeling. Not a good feeling at all. So if we're really bought into this music education moving forward together, do you think that needs to change? Do you think it would be important for it to change? It would be the foundation for our change moving forward. We can't deny that there are some things in place, that we have to make a difference. We have to speak to. We have to speak to it, and so that we're all accountable. We're all accountable for where we go. We are accountable for advocating for all music educators, for advocating for all music students, for advocating for all music programs, no matter if the program is conducted in a closet or if the program is in an entire wing. In that situation in the closet, that may be all they have. It's not less than the wing. It is just important in that space as it is over here as a wing. We have to think about that if we're going to move together as the field of music education. We have to break down these concerns that we have about inclusion, access, equity, and diversity. We can't run from those topics. And we can't put them in little boxes and compartments. They have to be full out and open in order for us to grow as a family of music educators. That's the only way that we can move forward. We have to face the truth and deal with the truth and make every good effort to move forward as music educators. And we have to also think about, I'm giving you a lot of we have tos, and I know that, but I want you to consider the students that I haven't mentioned yet. We have students that are English language learners, students with dyslexia, students who are considered gifted and talented, students who are in special education and receive special education services. There are many, many more students, many, many more voices that we need to raise for all of the students that want to be entitled to be in music. Every student should be entitled to be in music education. So as we consider every student in every classroom and every community, we have a lot to look forward to. We have a lot that we can work on. We have a lot that we can do differently. And as music educators who are no longer the sages on the stage, but we facilitate learning because we understand that it's just important for us to learn as it is for our students. And that we're not going to pour knowledge into our students because it's 2020 and many of our students are way ahead of us in creating and performing music in different venues that we've never even thought about. So we don't know it all. And to go into this new place thinking that we do, that would be naive. I'm excited about our journey ahead. I know we're going through tough times, but all is not lost. All is not lost. And I encourage you to think about the things that we can accomplish together. Think about the things that we can do together as a field of music education. Think about how we can bring more voices into our conversations and how we can ask more questions to make sure that we are being more equitable, making sure that the spaces become more inclusive, and we are continuing to build relationships across what we have maybe in the past thought was a line. There are no lines. There are no barriers. There should be no gatekeepers. If we're going to move forward, and what I've seen in these last few days, if there are any indications of what the music field can do, I'm the proudest because what I've seen my colleagues do is be collaborative. I've seen many, many, many collaborative efforts, lots of sharing, and the practice of gathering as a community to talk and to discuss and to be inspired. And every time we have an opportunity to not be silent, to open our mouths and voice dissent against racism, against systems that give advantages to some and take from others. Our field of music education is better. We are better. We are the leaders. And I encourage you to continue to be a leader, to continue to want the very best for the field of music education, to continue to share and accompany and support others in this process. We're going to get there. And I don't believe things will ever go back to where they were before. And I'm looking forward to our journey moving forward. What about you? Thank you.